Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to Singapore. Jeff, thank you so much for that rousing and generous introduction, and congratulations to you and the foundation for pulling together this extraordinary gathering. I'm just so blown away at the depth, the richness, the diversity, the high-powered nature of this entire room, this delegation, with leading representatives from government, from industry, from academia, and it just leaves me scratching my head. Who's running the country? And I think the answer is actually that it's in safe hands, it's in good hands. And it's because you have a really deep bench, right, back home. A really deep bench, really diverse bench, really global talent pool from which you've drawn in all ranks, all sectors, all stakeholders and communities across society, such that you can be the global Canadians that you all are and bring the world to Canada. And that's really the theme that I want to hit on this evening. And I think we obviously share in that spirit, share in that philosophy, and that's part of what's brought all of you here this evening. So I will share just a few introductory thoughts. I know that you have been in this room or rooms in this hotel for much of the day, looking at PowerPoint presentations and hearing remarks, so I won't overdo it. And I'm just so excited also to hear your impressions of your time here in Singapore and traveling around the region, and what your take is on the economic, social, cultural dynamism, the talent pool here, and how you intend to tap it in the future. Sarah told me earlier that people-to-people ties are one of the most crucial strategic pillars of your Indo-Pacific strategy, and I applaud that, and I think that your presence here really speaks to that, so I'm just so interested in the feedback around that. So just a few thoughts to share. First and foremost is around some of the secular economic megatrends that are really shaping the world and that I think you are going to be poised to take advantage of. What I'm showing you here in this sort of cartogram is the world economy broken down by color-coded regions, but measured in purchasing power parity terms. This could have come from McKinsey, right, Dominic? In the good old days. What you have here is just a reminder that the world is very much a tripolar, multi-regional order. We think about the world as being so chaotic and in disarray and disorder and full of tension and rivalry and splintering and so forth. But remember this, geography still matters. We live in a world of these continental scale, mega regional economic systems. North America is obviously one, Europe is another, and then you have Asia, right? And as was mentioned earlier, you have not only, more than half the world's economy now represented by Asia, most certainly in purchasing power parity terms, especially developing Asian markets benefit significantly from an upward revision in GDP when you measure their economies in PPP terms. And that's quite justified given the growing consumption share of GDP in those societies. And what's important to take away from this, among several points that you see visualized here, one is just remember this, that in traditional economic development theory, we tended to think of societies when we measured their incomes in US dollar terms, that it was only at an income level of, say, $12,000 to $15,000 GDP when you really started to see a liftoff in consumption. That's kind of old news, fake news, in the spirit of what Goldie was saying earlier. The reality is that you see mass consumption taking off at per capita income levels of $2,000 to $3,000 all across Asia, because you have to factor in local currency, you have to factor in the digitization of services, the penetration of financial services, all through these economies. So don't judge any country in Asia simply by what its income level is in US dollar terms. Look at what they spend in their own economies, and you'll be staggered, you'll be blown away at just how rapidly the modernization effect is taking hold. Now, why is this important? Well, when you're talking about most of the world's population clustered in one region and a large number of countries, you're going to have high inequality, right? Let's face it, all of Asia is not Singapore, right? In fact, if just Southeast Asia were a country, just this, this little corner, this little neck of the woods with a mere 700 million people, right? If these dozen countries with 700 million people were a country, right, it would be by far the most unequal country in the world, right? Because you would have countries with the income levels of Singapore or Brunei, and you would, shout out to Brunei, I had to throw that in there. And then you would have, of course, East Timor and Myanmar and so forth, right? And so bear that in mind. But here in this region, and one of the things that inspires me living here and traveling around over the last 20 plus years, is that inequality, which is something that in our, in Western societies, we think of as a source of deep social tension, great political rifts emerging over inequality, a source of immense political friction, even turning our societies into, in a way, powder kegs to some degree. Here, that's not the way, even though the inequality is far, far, far more severe statistically, right, here within Asian countries. You don't see those rifts. What you see is that eagerness to strive and to reduce that poverty, to build the infrastructure, to promote connectivity, to expand those services, to build those safety nets, and so on and so forth, right? So, in other words, poverty, relative poverty, is just seen as a challenge, as an obstacle, as an opportunity to overcome, to bring more people into the tent of being active citizens, consumers, and agents. And I think all of that is really captured to some degree just in this one chart. Now, again, North America is clearly still one of those big three pillars. The second point I want to make is geopolitical in a way, which is that, especially given the increasing geopolitical tension and rivalry, particularly between the United States and China, that's coupled or attended today also by nearshoring, protectionism, industrial policy, all these sets of measures that countries are taking in order to shore up the domestic manufacturing industrial base, protect their supply chains, and so on and so forth. And that's happening not just at a national level, right? It's incorrect to portray that as something that's only done nationally. It's something that's happening regionally. And so I put this map up to remind everyone, as much as you're here representing Canada, of course, think about actually a term that only Canadians use, but I also use, which is the North American Union. Right? You don't hear a lot of Americans say that. I probably am the only one who does, but it's not meant to mean that North America is going to emulate this pattern of becoming a supranational entity like the European Union with a single capital and all of these sorts of things. But the data shows that really over the last 10 years, so again, pre-COVID, even pre-Trump, we started to see this trend towards increasing regional integration. Certainly it's been happening in Asia, and I'll come to that in just a second. But just by the eve of COVID alone, and Trump did accelerate this process, but over the last several years, depending on the year, US and Canada, US and Mexico have had larger bilateral trade volumes than the United States has had with China, right? So this regional effect has been underway pre-COVID and is now most certainly going to continue as a result of countries realizing that they want to secure themselves, ensure themselves against the vulnerabilities for long distance, just-in-time global supply chains and so forth. And so thinking in continental terms is very important, and it is a core geopolitical principle, really going back to the 19th century. I'm not going to bore you with arcane Swedish and German theories of geopolitics when you should really be eating your dessert, by the way. I hope you're not holding up for me. But continentalism is the term that was used way back then because powers wanted to ensure that they could have stable agricultural supply and access across all seasons, and that was something that needed to be done through longitude, not just latitude, if you will. So think about the way in which North American cooperation is expanding, and hope, obviously, that there is, say, political stability in the United States in such a way that the momentum that's been generated over the last decade continues, because it's something that's going to ensure a greater prosperity for this North American pillar of the world economy that was represented in the previous chart. Now, that said, there's definitely divergence still between the US and Canada and how you're approaching the Asian opportunity, because the US cannot get back to the table in the major trade agreements. Canada's been very wise to, right? That which Obama couldn't pass, and Trump discarded, and Biden can't get over the line again. Still, it baffles many Americans actually that, we thought that TPP wasn't going to happen, right? They didn't appreciate that, well, the Canadians, Mexico, Chile, Japan, Australia, New Zealand all wanted to move forward with growing a trans-Pacific trade, and now, the U.S. is putting forward a hodgepodge of, sort of alternative or complementary kinds of measures. But suffice it to say, the purpose here is, with this sort of Venn diagram, is to point out that despite the regionalism, there is still going to be a very robust globalization, right? You can have regionalism and globalism coexist. Regionalism is in many ways a stepping stone towards greater globalization. It actually always has been. Right now in the media today, these are being portrayed as antithetical. All of history tells us that they're not. And this is very important because I mentioned a moment ago with the North American regional integration, that's one part of the global puzzle, but Asia is where, exactly a year ago, the largest regional trade framework in history was signed, the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, RCEP. And in trade analysis, whether academic or otherwise, we tend to underestimate the amount of gains to GDP that are unlocked through these regional trade agreements. We especially do that when we're not part of them. And so it's in particular in the American media where talk of RCEP is utterly absent. But suffice to say, if history is any guide, RCEP is going to lead to enormous gains well beyond that which have been conservatively predicted in terms of the benefits to the regional economy. So that's point number one. Point number two, since we're here in Singapore, is to look at the countries in the middle, at the intersection, the overlap of these rectangles, and you'll see some familiar flags because it's Southeast Asian countries. And this is, again, a reminder that trade agreements, these regional trade agreements and interregional trade agreements that we tend to characterize in our, especially geopolitical discourse, as being rivalries, right? TPP versus RCEP, the American-sponsored system versus the Chinese one. That's actually not the way history plays out either. In the real world, which is, again, thousands of years of history, or even just hundreds if you want to talk about the specifics of trade that we've measured, this always winds up being additive. Trade agreements are additive. They're not substitutive, right? And the countries in the middle make sure of that because they're the ones who are saying, I'm not going to choose sides, right? I'm going to make sure that I participate in as many trade agreements as possible because small countries, such as all the countries in this corner of the world, are price takers. They don't get to make the rules, but they want to benefit from the arbitrage, from the supply chain shifts. And of course, that's what they're doing right now, right? As you see foreign investment, manufacturing in particular, start to migrate, trickle out of China, the biggest beneficiaries are countries in South and Southeast Asia. They don't get to make the rules, but they get to benefit from being part of all of these agreements. There's a very famous phrase, some of you who've lived here long enough or visited enough times to Singapore may know the name Tommy Koh, legendary Singaporean diplomat. And one of his many witty, memorable lines was, we would sign a free trade agreement with the moon if we could, right? And that very well captures the mentality of countries in this region. So when you think of Singapore, your visitor, this is an entrepot, right? It is itself obviously a country that I call home and a place that I think of as the de facto capital of all of Asia. But your access around the region is only going to grow more and more frictionless and seamless as a result of the fact that under the radar, these mega regional trade agreements are underway. Now let me focus on this region for just a moment, Southeast Asia, because it has been historically neglected and it's finally enjoying its moment in the sun. And it's not going to be a moment. It's going to be a nice, long boom. And the reason is because really, again, across history, different regions of the world have that period of time where the stars align, where you have young populations, where you have pragmatic governance, where you have a lot of infrastructure investment, where you have the trade agreements, and where the geopolitics favors a region, and the great powers are interested in doing more investment in business and trade there. And all of those conditions, all of those boxes are being ticked right now here in Southeast Asia. So But it's also part of the broader Asian story in which you have not one engine, right? We've tended to conflate Asia with China. But in reality, the broader evolutionary story is of a multi-engine Asia that starts with the Japanese economic miracle of the post-war decades, then followed on by the tiger economies, then China coming in as really the third motor, and now the countries in yellow. South and Southeast Asia is what I call the fourth wave of Asian growth. And this fourth wave has almost limitless potential. You know, you're talking about a population in these, again, countries in yellow here, with a combined population of 2.5 billion people, right? Obviously significantly larger than China alone across this set of dozen countries. Younger median age, all of them have a younger median age than China. Many of them are growing at a faster growth rate than China. And as I mentioned before, a huge amount of foreign investment is coming in, not only from China, but from Japan, from other tiger economies, including Singapore, and from the whole world. And so that's part of what is driving the spectacular growth around this region. Again, all of those trends are set to continue. And growth in Asia, therefore, though, is not either or, right? It's not a zero-sum game. It's Japan, and it's China, and it's Singapore, and the tiger economies, and Southeast Asia at the same time. So think of Asia as, again, multiple drivers, maybe multiple speeds, but it's an additive picture, especially given the trade agreements and investment agreements that are underway. So now let's talk about the demographic piece and how it relates back to Canada. You know, now you've seen, in a way, the enormous material opportunity, if you will, right? You know, why you should be investing here, trading here, exporting here, producing here, and so on and so forth. But now let's get to that people-to-people story for just a moment, because we're at a really significant demographic inflection point in the world that has never been experienced before, which is namely that the world population is reaching a plateau, right? And you may recall November 15th last year, the United Nations declared that this is the day that the 8 billionth person is born. The world population has reached 8 billion. India's population is officially larger than China's. But also, given the slowing fertility globally, the baby busts of the financial crisis and the COVID baby bust, which was even more severe, you know, you have a world population that is not going to reach the 15 billion that was forecast even 20, 25 years ago. Instead, the new consensus is a far lower number. I don't think the world population will actually even reach 9.5 billion people, actually. So most of the people who will ever live are already alive today, and will reach this moment, the so-called peak humanity, in around 2036, 2037. Really, in the blink of an eye, we'll reach the maximum number of human beings, and it'll begin to taper off from there. Now, this may seem like, okay, well, fine, you know, long-term demographic trend and so on, but really, we have I don't think anyone is prepared for this, because no one alive today, no one in this room, has ever spoken firsthand to anyone, and no one whom you've even spoken to, not even your parents or grandparents, could ever have told you about a time that they can remember, that they lived in, where the world population was not growing like this, right? Because the world population was 2 billion people in 1920 and reached 8 billion people just now over 100 years. And really, we have no idea what it's like to live in a world where the population is not immensely, rapidly expanding. And the fact that it's not happening anymore is something that you can really, I think the implications are probably best captured in science fiction, because we're just not prepared economically for that. And why is this so important? Well, because where the people are is going to matter more and more and more. And right now, the people are here in Asia. And they're not only here now, they'll always be here. Right? Asia represents the majority of the world population, as you see here. These are my 5 billion neighbors. And I call this the lunchtime, or I call this the one laptop charge radius. Like, you can hop on a plane here, you don't have to charge your laptop. You can go to pretty much anywhere in this circle, and you can kind of visit with this incredible, diverse geography of populations in this region, and Asia is actually larger than just this, this spotlight. But so Asia is the center of the world population, and it always will be, also because of that demographic plateau. Because in order to dominate the future world population, you also have to have the most young people today. So the world population, even at 8 billion, is still more young than old. So yes, we have incredible achievements in life expectancy and longevity, but the majority, about 5.5 billion people are still under the age of 45. So either millennials, Gen Z, or Gen Alpha. Now, of millennials, Gen Z, and Gen Alpha, the majority of those in the world are Asian. So if I had to sum up the future of the human species in 2 words, those 2 words would be the 2 words here, Asian youth. Like, I actually think that's literally a true statement. Literally, the future of the human species is Asian youth. So now you're starting to see where this is going and why this matters, right? Because if you take just today's working age millennials, which is one sliver of the total youth population, you have more than 10 times more of just them than you have in, say, Europe or the United States. And there's even more Gen Z than there are millennials, and there will be even more Gen Alpha than Gen Z. After that is when it'll start to go downhill. So whoever wins the Asian youth wins the demographic future, if you will, right? And you're all here to tap that, right? That's your target, right? You're the heads of the universities, corporations, you're running immigration policy as well, you're trying to recruit the best and the brightest from this enormous pool of human capital known as Asian youth. So where are they going to go? And that's one of the things that I've been looking at very closely as I explore everything from geopolitical tensions and conflicts and refugee flows to climate change as well, to just the war for young talent. And that's, to me, the operative principle. If the future of our demographics is today's youth, and we, whether it's Canada or the United States, European, OECD countries, are facing aging populations, high debt levels, high dependency ratios, it's all about capturing the war for, it's all about the war for young talent, right? Whichever country attracts young people today is going to be a winner. Those countries that are hemorrhaging or shedding young people are going to be the losers of the future. So for all the complexity in the world, it kind of does boil down to that in terms of success and failure. And that is the prize. Keep your eye on that prize, because again, we're no longer in a world where if your country is losing people, you're just producing more to come behind them, right? There's actually only one country that still does that, and it's an Asian country, and it's India. But that's also then, therefore, a rich target for you, as you all know. So we've settled into some familiar patterns around intra and interregional migration globally, but the combination of climate change and the war for young talent is going to shift some of those patterns and open up new opportunities where Asian populations will be moving north, they'll be moving west, they're certainly moving across the Pacific in record numbers as well. And this almost static picture is really going to change. And I could animate it and show you the directions in which people are flowing, but what we want to focus on here is getting them to Canada, right? So I like to do a lot of heavy-duty, rugged field work, get a lot of dirt under my fingernails, throw myself into conflict and near-death experiences. But the most humbling experience I had in researching this last book was applying to immigrate to Canada. Deeply humbling experience. And all I had to do was to open up my laptop one evening, say, I'm going to do some field work. My wife and I were sitting there. I was like, let's see if I can qualify to move to Canada, right? Because I'm writing about this, so I need to know. So I put in my various, attributes and traits, my age, academic qualifications, and so forth. And it turns out I got 2 points in your immigration system. And I was like, I should have been, I want to be born again as a young Brazilian, bartender or something. I would have gotten like dozens of points, and I would have had a, passport or whatever emailed to me, a visa emailed to me right away. And I'm saying this not to criticize the Canadian system. I'm saying actually it's really smart, right? That's how you win the war for young talent, is is sort of ageism, favoring young people and making it super easy for them to go online, click, 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 scan in your credentials, your bona fides, and boom, you're in. That's how you win the war for young talent, right? And you do it digitally, and that's what you've done. So again, as humbling an experience as it was for me, it's a celebration of Canada really being a big winner. And as you already know, Canada's really climbing the ranks, right, when it comes to net inward immigration. And in my last book, I do, kind of go out of my way to use Canada as a role model in many ways. First is just the numbers, right? The fact is that there is no country, pound for pound, as a share of its own population that imports as many, voluntarily, as many net new migrants every single year as Canada, and that's staggering. It also is very important, obviously, for political reasons to make this point and to bang on this drum over and over and over, because again, our conventional, pessimistic media narratives are always talking about populism, protectionism, xenophobia, borders and walls as the order of the day and the trend in the world. I say, well, actually, last time I checked, that's not how Canada works, right? That's not how Canada operates. Maybe true of Hungary, but Hungary is not exactly a role model, right? Canada is. So I think it's important that Canada keep on doing what it's doing. And in a way, it's a very opportune moment to focus on the young populations because, of course, that competition is broadening, right? America is no longer the only place that people look to go. You're already, I think really everyone in this room knows this, you're practicing this, you're already seeing that you are winning that war for young talent, recruiting from all over the world. But I want to almost end on a very positive note for Canada, but also a cautionary note that it's not just America versus Canada or America versus Canada versus the UK. What I've noticed happening around the world is more and more countries are saying that they're going to start, switch their medium of instruction from their vernacular languages to English, right? And that they're going to deploy more subsidies to attract young engineering and tech talent. A country like Germany is issuing, the sort of equivalent blue cards, as I guess they're known in the European system, or different kinds of ways of attracting young workers. There's going to be there's basically two types of countries in the world. Those that realize that there is this relentless war for young global talent, and those that have not realized it. And more countries are realizing it. So even as Canada becomes an incumbent winner in this, there'll be other countries nipping at your heels and copying your systems and going after the Asian talent pool and the global talent pool. It will not stop until every last bright young person has been absorbed into a university either in Canada or elsewhere. So these are actually early days. It seems to me that you're doing almost everything right. I know that Jeff and I have said there's definitely nitpicking and some criticisms and some things around visas could be done better, but as we all know, it's a lot better than the American system, right? And you're supposed to laugh at that, by the way. You're supposed to have fun at Americans' expense, especially when it's one of us saying it. But bear in mind that even in Asia, and this is the point I'm on, Asians aren't sleeping at the wheel, right? And this is something that's really important to remember. So just to tie together a few threads here, Asia is doing a lot to integrate itself. Asia is modernizing like crazy. Asians during COVID realized that they are going to, spend an indefinite period of time, or if they thought so, in their own region. And they were accustomed to obviously exporting a lot of brains, but now they're saying, hold on, what can we do to retain the talent right here within our own countries as well? Should we be sending them abroad? Why don't we have the best universities here? We are going to innovate. Right? So even as you come here to poach talent, you've also come here to set up partnerships. And maybe the future isn't necessarily zero-sum, even as it may be from a migratory standpoint and a residential standpoint. But part of the broader story of people-to-people ties, growing diasporas, growing migration, growing digital connectivity, is to think more in a circulatory sense about these things. Think about these as people-to-people networks, not just a tug of war over people. So I've characterized it in one way, but I also think that the future is one in which we're sharing these brains, not just fighting over them. And your being here is also in that spirit of partnership between Canada, between Canada and Singapore and all the Asian countries that you are traveling to and building these partnerships in. And I think that Canada's brand is so incredibly strong. I know that you are being so well received everywhere, not least here in Singapore. And that's really a sign, a very positive sign of the time. So with that, just a couple more points is that students, but also it's happening at other rungs of the professional ladder. You may have seen some of the survey data. Any survey where Canada comes out on top, I'm sure makes it through around on Twitter and elsewhere pretty quickly. But in these surveys of expats and desirable destinations, Canada, this survey was done taking into account 2020 data as a most desired destination for professionals. So between students, between young professionals, I think what you're doing so well is capturing them while they're young, having them begin their immigration journey the day they set foot in the country, having them build those lifelong ties even when they travel back and forth within the region. But attracting global citizens, such as young people think of themselves as being today, to Canada, but turning them into global Canadians, which is really what all of you already are. And that's a very special gift to pass on to that next generation, irrespective of where they were born. So thank you so much for having me here this evening. I look forward to our conversation. Thank you. Thank you.
So we'll let Parag catch his breath, but only for just a minute. And it's my pleasure to introduce our discussant to have a brief conversation with Parag. And it's Sarah Wilshaw. Sarah has represented Canada on 3 continents, in Tokyo, in Geneva, in Delhi, and in Dallas. And she now serves as Assistant Deputy Minister of International Business Development at Global Affairs Canada, and is known in that capacity as Canada's Chief Trade Commissioner. And she's a graduate of York University. Come on up, Sarah.
Thank you. Wow. You gave us a lot to think about. That was a pretty amazing tour de force. Thank you so much for being with us and for allowing us to sort of share in some of your wisdom. Sounds like we're doing a lot of things right. I'd be really curious to know what you think we could do better in this space, and particularly, so in a little bit about what I do as the Chief Trade Commissioner, which is just a title that means I get to lead a really amazing team of 1,500 trade professionals called the Trade Commissioner Service in 160 locations around the world and across Canada. And I hope that all of the folks in the room know who their trade commissioners are and are working with them. But one of the things that we do that maybe people don't know as much is work to try and attract folks into Canada, that talent that you're talking about. We spend a lot of time thinking about that. Your stat I can update for you. I think you had 634,000 students in Canada. We're about 800,000 more now.
Excellent.
And that is worth $22 billion to our economy. And more than 100,000 jobs come out of that. But it's worth much more than that, right? Because this is about the future. So we're coming up to a refresh of our international education strategy. What should we be thinking about?
In 2 words, sort of absorptive capacity, right? Because all of this has to fit into a broader plan around deep economic diversification, really, expanding the productivity, the size, the scale of so many sectors of the Canadian economy, so that as you attract all those graduates, there's appropriate jobs for them. Their skills are being put to work, and I think that's a national scale effort. It requires the kind of government, academia, industry alignment that is physically present in this room, but there are other countries, as you well know, like say Korea or Germany, where there's such a concerted national subsidized strategy around doing that day in and day out, right? the government checks in with industry around exactly what kinds of skills they need, and then goes out and recruits for those kinds of investors and those kinds of students. And it's a very dynamic process in those countries that are so focused on competitiveness and diversification at the same time. So I think that in Canada, on the one hand, you're doing things right. You know it's that window of opportunity, and you've got a huge amount of talent coming in. But ask yourself, how are we harnessing and absorbing all of this talent as well as we could, and deploying it for broad-based economic growth that's sustainable across all these different sectors of the economy, or is it potentially transient, and you want to guard against that?
Right, that's it, exactly. How do we keep them once they're there? And then how do we reduce the friction of getting them into Canada as well, as you pointed out. You talk in your book a fair bit about assimilation. And actually here in Singapore, you cite Singapore as a great example of how assimilation has helped in this case. And I think, even just what you just said about absorptive capacity, part of that is how you help people to adjust to being in a place. In Canada, we talk about multiculturalism. And we talk about the value of that because of the diversity that it brings to our, and the richness that it brings to our society, but also as an advantage for our businesses, for our economy. What sort of unpack a little bit how you see the difference, and is it just a timeline question? Because obviously second and third generation in Canada sort of move further out and are much more assimilated in that sense. But what is the meaning of that to you?
So do almost all, at least Western countries, certainly Anglophone countries, eventually, despite the ebbs and flows of politics, wind up becoming more diverse, more assimilative, and so forth over time, the way Canada, United States, and even to their own surprise, Germany, and countries like that have become? The answer is yes, but that doesn't mean it's easy, right? So it requires that not only does Canada have the deep philosophical roots to support that mission through the multiculturalist kind of frame, but I think that the national dialogue is very healthy on this. But it does come down to the local level also, obviously. And so one of the reasons I bring up Singapore in my work is because it's a very compact, small, dense place where they have for generations emphasized, I guess from the outside it looks like social engineering, but in a way it's almost, you would think of it as a precautionary principle at work, where you're saying better to prevent social fissures emerging along ethnic lines and instead preemptively ensure that you actually have mixed communities as much as possible that learn to live in harmony. So there's certainly places in Canada where you'd say, maybe we want to make sure that we don't have too many enclaves and this kind of thing, and emphasize obviously English or French language learning and so forth, and that's really key. We know from the European example that if you were to take European countries and divide them up by those that are stronger at assimilation and those that are weaker, all other factors you could almost blend out. Language would be the one. So in countries where foreigners in a way are mandated, required to learn the language as a condition of citizenship, are going to have a much, much better ride in the long run. So that's something to be mindful of as well. And I think at the end of the day, it does actually tie to the economic piece, right? So jobs, right? And the other, as we know from countries that fail at successful assimilation, it isn't ultimately just culture, right? It's actually often economic in nature as well. So when the going is good, people get along. How do you prevent, or the going is not good economically, those tensions emerge. So just make sure that the going is always good. So I think these things are actually pretty deeply connected.
Again, you've got perhaps the right people in the room to help us see
indeed.
that through. So I am being told that we are running out of time. So unfortunately, we're going to have to wrap up there. But given the room that is here, and that we are here in Asia at this time having this conversation. Do you have any final thoughts for us as industry, academia, government, venture capitalists that are here, from all across the region, alumni, students? What is it? Yeah, what's a final thought for us to take away?
One is just an anecdote. I remember about 9-10 years ago when the Singapore government was thinking about various strategies to promote innovation and dynamism and startups and the tech sector and which sectors do we subsidize, how many grants do we give, and all this kind of stuff. I said, if you really want to really stimulate more innovation here in Singapore, just have more nonstop flights to San Francisco. And they did. There's like 4 a day now, right? And that's obviously being glib, but that's part of the story of how Singapore has emerged as a major tech hub. Obviously, that's not to discount the incredible investments that have been made and the talent pool here and what the universities have done. But I'm just pointing that connectivity, right? So you and I were talking earlier, you've got one flight maybe every day or every other day to Vancouver. Like that's not enough, right? Build more of those,
I think Air Canada's over
aerial
here somewhere.
bridges here. That's absolutely crucial. Make it easy for people. Just like you have to make it easy for people to immigrate, into the country and make it seamless. Because again, one takeaway is young people are incredibly mercenary. This is, if I have one takeaway from some of my research, it's that young people are scouring the world all the time. They're saying, well, which place has the most affordable rent, subsidized education, fastest internet speed, this kind of thing, immigrant friendliness, fast track to a passport. Very like KPI data driven, right? Young people, Gen Z and whatnot, are not just sitting on the couch like waiting for a savior. They're out there shopping in this marketplace, right? And so part of it is like, okay, what's the most connected country? How can I get there the fastest? Exactly how many years till I get citizenship? Can I get a mortgage or whatever? Like they're looking at all these things. So put your message out there. And I know it's difficult for the humble Canadians that you are to sort of strut your stuff, but a little bit more edge is not going to hurt because again, like I said, there are 2 kinds of countries, those that realize they're in the war for talent and those that don't. And you guys know it, which is an asset, and you're acting on it, which is also great. But more and more countries are going to launch those branding campaigns to get that marginal, talented young person. So you've got to promote yourselves even more.
We'll be bolder. Thank you so much. This has been a really great conversation.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you.